Hello, I'm Cari Stein, executive producer of the PBS program To the Contrary with Bonnier Bay. This week, we are airing the third installment of our second annual About Girls and Women Film Festival. The winning entry focuses on an important but disturbing issue, FGM, or female genital mutilation. Cut, Exposing FGM, which is the name of the program, was reported and produced by Professor Dr. John Chua. He traveled nearly a decade across the globe to learn more about a practice that many believe is solely an issue impacting African women. But that's not the case. That's not true. FGM, most people don't realize this, but is and has a history in the United States. Joining me now are two women who are profiled in the film. We have Rene Bergstrom, who as a child had to undergo that procedure, and she tells her story in the film. And we also have with us historian, there you go, there you are, historian Sarah Rodriguez, who has done extensive research on female circumcision. Ladies, thank you very much for joining us, joining me for this. And we really want to bring some attention onto the issue, as well as bring attention to the program that we have coming up this weekend that you'll either be able to see on your PBS show, on your PBS station, or you can see it on the web. I want to start first with you, Rene. What I'd like for you to tell is, like, what's the reaction when people learn that you, as a young girl here in the United States, underwent FGM?
People are shocked that it actually happened here in the United States, but also many years. The second reaction was to silence me, as if it were my shame instead of the shame of our culture that tends to want to control women.
And that's, that's such a theme today, and it really hits people a lot, that women should feel shame for something that they had nothing, that they were not, that they were the victims, they had nothing to do with it. So why did you decide to come tell the story? I know that originally you went to a meeting and you were talking about it. You weren't expected to be there. How did that happen?
Oh, I worked at a theater, and I was working on a brochure on and so I went to a conference on male circumcision, and there were some women there who had also been cut. I told my story. It was videotaped, and it's almost like 20 years later, or at least 15 years later, John Chua found that videotape and then located me. And that's how then he came here to interview me.
And I mean, that was pretty brave. That was very brave that you unsilenced yourself, that you decided, I'm going to talk about it.
And health-wise, keeping secrets is hard on a person. And I feel so much more free and healthy having shared it. The reaction of my friends and people who now know has been very positive and very supportive. And I really appreciate that.
No, that is special. Sarah, Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in researching female circumcision?
Okay, so first I'm going to start by saying, just so we're all clear about the procedures we're talking about. So my research was on 2 of them. WHO lists 4 types of FGM, and my research was on 2, which is female circumcision and clitoridectomy. Female circumcision is the removal of the clitoral foreskin. So the clitoris itself is still there. And the clitoris is actually, when we think of the clitoris, most of us think of the external part of the organ. And actually internally, it's a much larger organ. If you think of a wishbone, the clitoris actually looks like a wishbone. And what we think of the clitoris is that sort of the nub where the wishbone joins. It actually has those really long wings that are internal too. So in the United States, my research was on female circumcision and clitoridectomy, which is the removal of that external part of the clitoris. And I became interested in it as a topic actually when I was in college. I was reading for fun Alice Walker's Possessing the Secret of Joy. And in it, it's a story about a woman from, and I apologize that I don't remember if it was a made-up African country or an actual African country in it, but she immigrates to the United States and she ends up meeting a woman who had her clitoris removed as a child in the 1930s, I think, in the story. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if that's made up too, or if that's actually happened. So I ended up writing an undergraduate research paper on it, then I went up and wrote an honors thesis for my college degree on it. And then I ended up writing my dissertation and then a book about it. So that's how I got interested in it, was actually trying to see if, like, I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that happened. And then dug up deeper to say, like, she didn't make it up, obviously. And it actually happened in this country for a good period of time as a medical therapy. And I think I'm going to underline that. It was a medical therapy for children. And it was typically done as an intervention for children. We're talking about physicians would write about it as a sort of cure for masturbation. When they published about it, that's how they talked about it, how they would use it. And I want to stress that for quite a while, masturbation was actually thought to have physiological problems. If anyone's ever heard the old saying of, like, you could go blind, there were actually sort of seen for quite a while sort of that there would be physiological harm to somebody if you were masturbating. And so some physicians, not all, some physicians sometimes intervened in that manner for kids.
Was it, I know that in the film you discussed that sort of it wasn't widespread, but it did happen. How did it finally come to pass that it wasn't happening and that it was no longer being used?
So there's 2 things going on because they're 2 separate surgeries. So for the clitoridectomy, the last published reference I found was from the 1960s. So, but that's the published. So that, I mean, obviously physicians don't write about everything they do. This was a published discussion about actually a physician saying it shouldn't be being done. But I think for treatment for children, I think a lot of it came from seeing masturbation as not having sort of physiological repercussions. And once that was sort of seen as being like, that isn't a problem physiologically, then that surgery for that use started to go down or to stop being used. And yes, I say in the book, there's no evidence that it was a common practice, but the fact that I found practitioners all across the United States at various points between the 1870s and the 1840s, 1850s doing it suggests it's not like an isolated occurrence that one random physician in one random place was doing. But I would stress that there's no evidence that it was like as common as like infant male circumcision, let's say. But I also say it obviously it did happen, and it wasn't just, like I said, it wasn't like one practitioner in one town doing it kind of thing.
Rene,
Yes.
did you know any other young women that you grew up with who had underwent circumcision?
No, and I did not talk about it with my friends or even my sister. Was really silenced.
But then you went to there were problems that
There were, especially giving birth, because I did not anticipate any problems. But my scar tissue did not stretch. And I must have had extensive scar tissue because I probably fought the procedure as a little girl. And obstetrician did an episiotomy that took 2-3 months to heal.
And you also then later on, part of the documentary, the cut, you are sort of paired with, you had met a young Somali woman, Filsan, and we meet her in the documentary too. Tell us about your relationship with her.
I was her college professor, and in one assigned, she wrote about this. So we talked privately about our experiences and worked together on creating a brochure for infibulated Somali women to give to their midwives or obstetricians. Have the conversation in advance to plan labor and delivery so that they would not have unnecessary C-sections. And there was a way of cutting up the second stage that would open things very easily, and they'd be able to have their babies normally.
Wow. So, and you've become good friends.
Yes, we are good friends.
And you can see that. You see the relationship. What is it that that you, Sarah, would like to see come out of people watching this show?
Well, I think for me, it's that this isn't, right. I think a lot of times Americans really do see this as being something that generically happens in Africa. And it doesn't obviously happen, I'm using generically and like this because it's not everywhere in Africa. It's not like the entire continent practices various forms of FGM. But it's seen as very much a procedure done by people outside the United States. And it's sort of seen as then as a cultural practice done by people who aren't sort of native born in this country. And my big thing is for me is, and with this documentary and what I've written about too, is sort of thinking about it. It has a larger history. It has a history in this country. And for us to intelligently sort of talk about and compassionately talk about different sort of responses to various forms of cutting across the world, we have to acknowledge our own practice in this country of the various types of certain things that do fall under that category.
And Rene, you also, are you involved in efforts to stop FGM worldwide? Rene?
Oh, me. I wasn't sure. I am. I went to the Girls Summit in Washington, D.C. last year. I've been supporting some of these young women who are working within their cultures financially, and also just sharing my story has been valuable to them.
And I know that there's a walk. I always get information about a walk that goes on to stop FGM. Any final thoughts? Either one of you, any final thoughts?
I'm gonna let Rene.
Okay. Just that women throughout the world need to unite on this. Our bodies are beautiful just the way they are.
Great. Well,
I
thank
know
you.
that the women
Really, oh, I'm sorry.
there are women today who think that they need to have surgery to make their private parts more beautiful. And that is just another saying, okay, the way we are. And I find that to be very sad.
I think that's a very, very wise sentiment to end our Google Hangout on. And I want to encourage people to watch the film and they can either see it on the PBS station in their local area, or they can come back to thecontrary.org and they can watch the film. And I want to thank you for your involvement in the film and in this Google Hangout, Rene and Sarah, and hopefully we'll keep the conversation going.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for telling your story.